So, we were doing this kingdom of heaven material in Daniel. We were talking about the fact that Daniel really hasn't won acceptance in rabbinical circles, and therefore in the Hebrew Bible it was placed under writings. Here in the Protestant Catholic Bible, you'll find it almost like the fourth prophet after Ezekiel. And one of the reasons for that is that the minor prophets, as they're called in common language, starting with Daniel and Amos, Hosea, Joel, and so on, are to some extent arranged according to descending length. So Daniel would be the first and longest of the so-called minor prophets, if you want to call that. Jews wouldn't put him under minor prophets. They would only put him under writings, as I told you. And this isn't really very prophetical here, Daniel. You wouldn't really, when you look at it, it really doesn't come across as a prophetical book. But it's a new kind of book. It's apocalyptic. And I think before we're finished here, you people should begin to read that this is a new style literature associated with the struggle for freedom against Greco-Hellenistic control. And so it carries over into the Roman period and the struggle for freedom from Rome. We've discussed this already several times. I repeat myself, but that's okay. It's always from a slightly different angle. I think that the Jews made a big mistake, and the rabbis, I think, generally agree with that, in the struggle for freedom against Rome. I don't blame them, and I sympathize with them, but I don't think they understood the ruthlessness, the power, and the real viciousness of what they were up against when they refused to submit to Rome. Now, Christians and Rabbinic Judaism knew that, and therefore the New Testament is as you presently have it to some extent, and Rabbinic Judaism is as we presently have it to some extent. But the Maccabees and people who were involved in this freedom struggle didn't submit, and they paid the price. And the scroll people, I think we'll see, didn't submit, and that's why the scrolls are in the caves and nobody came back to get them. Again, I'm off the top a little bit, but it's as far as submission and what happens to you when you don't submit. Why do you think I said or can think that no one came back to get these scrolls? Well, look, it isn't as if it's a big secret that they're there. People who were working there, living around there, involved in that movement, whatever was going on there, knew that they were in those caves, that they'd been in the caves. They must have fled very quickly before advancing military power, probably, and they didn't have time to take anything away with them, and nobody then came back. But why do you think nobody came back? I mean, look, those are literally over 1,000 manuscripts, over 1,000, maybe, I don't know how many manuscripts there are there, I forgot the latest count, maybe 1,600 or something. There's in one cave, cave 4, which is a repository, there's about, over 1,000 manuscripts of different kinds, pieces of them. We know from the handwriting that there's pieces of over 1,000 manuscripts there. That's on parchment. I mean, that's like the book I was just telling you about. Parchment is extremely valuable even today. That's treated leather. Those things are written on treated leather, and often people would write on the back of things like that. Even though it was written on one side, they would, if they didn't like what was written on, they'd write on the back and write something else. But that is extremely valuable. Nobody would leave it there if they knew it was there. So what does that tell you? Nobody could come back. Everybody was killed, or was taken to a place where they never could come back from. And I think it's a combination of those two things. And you got to think how tragic, in fact, the situation we're dealing with ultimately evolves into. Now, if you detect any anti-Paulinism in me, It's because of that. It's because he feels nothing for the tragedy of this people. He's only interested in his ideological struggle with people he's against and so on. He doesn't really care what's going to happen to them and what their fate finally is. And he doesn't really care that they don't have a Roman citizenship to save them when they get into trouble. You know, we're not doing Paul and James in this course, but he will come in often because he's using Dead Sea Scroll vocabulary. And he is clearly aware of the scroll type material just from the language he uses. Now, if you're a Christian or some other person who knows and deals with or even likes Paul, you won't maybe be aware of that, that he knows this movement and that he is deliberately representing it in a pretty negative way. And without any sympathy for it whatsoever. No charity, no Christian love. So if I come across negatively, it's because of that. I find that terribly offensive. Someone who doesn't pity anyone but himself. And I just don't like this person, and I'll just tell you that right off the bat. I do like the people of the scrolls, because to me, they are beautiful losers. They're going to lose. I don't agree necessarily with their ideas. They probably are out of their minds. But whatever you think of them or how they think, there's a certain beauty to the kind of, well, crazy ideas that they're coming up with. And also, they're going to lose. They're all going to die. They're all going to die. And that's something I think you should always remember when you're dealing with this. So, Daniel, then, is a literature, and I've repeated this already twice, but I'll say it a third time, which comes out of this movement. And again, since we looked a little at Paul in his letters, and we mentioned in passing that material in Galatians where Paul speaks about the history of Israel and the Sinai and Moses and the covenant, and he's speaking, he says in chapter 4 of the letter to the Galatians, he's speaking, as he puts it, allegorically, and he actually says it. I'll pull this out for you so you can once more hear it. I have my Greek English version, so it's all sort of marked up. But if you just quickly, I'm going to come back to Daniel, don't worry. If you just look again in Galatians chapter 4, if you don't have it, that's okay. I'm going to read it for you. And just to show you what he's about. First of all, if you start off early on at the end of chapter 3, he's talking about there being no Jew, no Greek. These are noble thoughts. I'm not against that. In Christ Jesus, everyone is equal. But if you are Christ, line 29 of 3, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs to the promise. But what do you mean you're Abraham's seed and heirs to the promise? How can he say that? If you're Abraham's seed is supposed to be a genealogical DNA matter. He's going to speak allegorically. Everything is allegorical. He takes the Bible allegorically. Now, I mentioned in passing somebody who is his older contemporary of his, who also takes, by the way, the reason I'm on this tangent here is to talk about freedom and slavery, which is what Daniel is about and what the Maccabee books are about. That's why I'm off on this tangent. Allegorically,